Hi there, Elevated Planet community. This is John Drew here from Elevated Planet, and today I'm here with my good friend Susan Grau. Hi, Susan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Fantastic, thank you.
Good.
I'm excited to be talking to you today, as I have explained to the Elevated Planet community on many an occasion over the last year and a half. I've been putting these things together. You were effectively the foundation that began my interest in exploring consciousness and higher consciousness and the reason why we're here and all that kind of thing. And the reason that happened is that back in May 2018, I had my first ever mediumistic reading with Susan. And it was the hour that changed my life. I would never have gone to that kind of thing. My daughter had a reading herself, and she'd suggested Susan, because I realized I needed to go as well, because her reading included messages for me. So I thought, well, that's weird. This must be real. There's got to be something in it. So I thought I'd better explore this for myself. And the hour that I had in your office, Susan, was the most incredible hour. And I remember when I left your office, and I was just like, it felt weird. It was like floating on a bit of a cloud. I thought, well, life is never going to be the same again now, is it? I've been speaking to my mom. I've been speaking to my grandparents. I've been speaking to my ex-father-in-law. And it got all these fantastic messages, and it couldn't be made up. It was absolutely brilliant, because I learned a lot of stuff. And it also went back to things that had happened in my childhood that nobody else would have known about. It was like all that evidential stuff that if I'd have, been looking for a hiding place, oh, well, hang on a second, maybe somebody could have looked at it. I was like, oh no, this was 5,300 miles away in the UK that all this stuff took place. And here we were in California going through this. So Susan, thank you. Thank you for beginning my journey.
Well, I'm honored that you say that. That's wonderful. I'm so happy because your journey has turned out to be just so in sync with the spiritual sector and the spiritual world. So I think that's wonderful. I'm grateful that you went that direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a complete sea change from the world of corporate finance kind of thing. But I'm so glad I've made this journey, because it's kind of taken me to a really good place in life. And that's what it's done for me, is just kind of helped me to realize why we're here and what this is all about. But Susan, can I just ask you, I'm going to take this back to really, your gift is an amazing gift, right? And that, I know I have zero doubt you're an incredible person. You're here for a real reason. How did it all begin for you? Would you like to just give us a bit of that background?
Well, I think I always had something. I just didn't understand what that was. I was very tiny. I remember we had some animals on our land, and that a couple of them passed away, and I saw them floating, and I didn't think anything. I didn't even think, is this normal? I thought nothing, because it'd be the same feeling of if you looked at your hand. Everybody has it, right? I never stepped outside. It just was. At 4.5 years old, tipping on 5, I got locked in an unplugged freezer in a garage. I was separated from our house. Some boys told me to climb up in there and get popsicles. Well, obviously it was unplugged, so there weren't any. And then they closed the freezer door, they closed the garage door, and they ran home. And with that separation, we had, I mean, there was a yard and a fence and a tool area. It was just so far. And then the laundry room, and then the kitchen, and then the living room where somebody might sit and watch TV or whatever. My mom was in the very back of the house. She said she heard some screaming, high pitched. It sounded like kittens or cats, not kittens, cats, mating. And she said it's that high pitched of a sound. And that's all she could compare it to. And she ignored it. And so I was in this freezer. I remember screaming, terrified. Until I started writing again, I didn't recognize how frightened I actually was. And I was really scared. And I remember knowing that at 4.5, I was almost 5, but so let's, but I didn't think that you could conceptualize death. And that is true. You don't conceptualize the actual journey of death, but survival mode is still in us from the moment we're born. From the moment you are a baby, you're in survival. That's why you're screaming for your bottle, because you know you have to eat. That's why, you know, all those things. The survival mode is already in us. And I didn't know that when I was little, but I know that now. And that's what happened to me, is survival mode stepped in. And so I kept screaming and screaming, and I could tell I was getting tired. And everything was dark, and then it wasn't. And I remember seeing 3 beautiful lights, and I knew one of them was extremely powerful. And they said, stop screaming. And we're going to get your mommy. And basically, but first, you know, but they didn't say those words. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
I don't remember being like yanked out of my body. I don't remember looking back at my body. I don't remember that. And a lot of people say that they, you know, they could see their body down below them and they weren't connected to it. I don't remember that. I remember almost like a little pop. That's what it felt like a pop gun, you know, that sound. And I remember just being at the bottom of the stairs. And I knew that there was something at the top of those stairs, and I could see the 3 white lights at the top. And I remember thinking, how am I going to get up there? Like I'm little. I remember being little. I wasn't just a spirit. I was little. And I remember that. So I think I wasn't completely gone, obviously, or I mean, I don't know. I can't even tell you. So I looked up and I thought, how am I going to get up? And boom, like another little pop. And I was at the top. And I was on the edge of this, what I call the well. And I could see movement in this well. And they were to the left of me. And I was looking at this well, and I wasn't afraid. And I was on the ledge. And it was dark, but there were words moving in this well. And there were tons of them. And I look back now and I look at it like DNA doing this. But at the time, I just saw it as words. And I said, where am I? And they said, you're in the room of heart's desires. And I knew those are people's desires. Like, and I didn't even really know what desires meant, but I knew what that was. I knew those were people's thoughts of what they wanted. And from there, it just went to, do you answer all those? You know, and I looked up and I saw crystals, and I saw, it was just this beautiful Greco-Roman room. I know that sounds a little off, but it was open at the ceiling, the same size that it was open in this floor. And it was almost as if it was coming from the top, but I was seeing it coming from the bottom. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but that's how it felt to me. Like almost like they were putting it there, kind of like we have a crown chakra. They were dropping into it, but yet it was coming from the bottom, and it was intermingling. And I realized that all of our words and our desires and our love and our needs are intermingling for them. And I said, do you answer all these? And they said, no, Cece, sometimes what people want the most isn't good for them.
Yes.
And from there came the yellow brick road, which is another part of that experience, which was phenomenal. I called it the yellow brick road because I'd seen the Wizard of Oz, and it made sense to me. And I could see pavers in a pyramid shape on the left side of this road. And I was watching humans. It was a golden road, and I was watching humans pull from the bottom of this pavers of this pyramid, and they were trying to pave their path, and it was bumpy and crooked and crazy, and it didn't pave easily. And I recognized that they were unbalancing the pyramid, and I recognized that it was their life journey. Don't know how I knew it, but I knew it. This was their life journey. Like, this is life over here. And they're pulling from the bottom, and they're making it all unbalanced.
Wow.
And I watched people drop to their knees and say, please, for the love of God, help me, help me, help me. And I watched what I consider to be angelic presence, because they come as we understand them. And I understood that, come in and start picking up the pavers on the road and putting them back to balance the life journey, and going to the top of the pavers, which, by the way, kept recreating themselves. And it, like our journey recreates itself as we do it, and pulling those pavers and starting to pave that road. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, we are the pavers. You are not. All you have to do is walk it. We know what's best for you. You think you know what's best for you. Didn't understand anything they meant. I didn't understand it, but I remembered it.
Yeah.
And they said, when you see a wall on your journey, as your pavers, you will not see one. You'll see obstacles to learn. When you are paving your path, you'll see walls, and it will be bumpy and crooked in a way that it doesn't need to be. And when that happens, you just shift. You don't run. What you run from chases you. What you try to control controls you. You shift. And as you shift, you'll see something else. And if you don't, you still see that wall, you shift again. And you continue to shift until what you're seeing in front of you is us paving your path. And those obstacles won't feel like a wall, because a wall you can get through, battered and bruised at best. But obstacles you're walking through, you're not banging your head against them. So I didn't understand anything they were telling me, to be honest with you. I just kind of heard it and I went, okay. Maybe a little bit I understood what they were saying, but not really. I didn't really even know what was happening, you know, like where I actually was. I didn't even have that understanding, where most people say they understand. Most children, I work with children that have near-death experiences, and most of them say, like I say, you know, I didn't really understand what they were saying, but I knew I would someday.
Yes.
And I didn't put the pieces together, but I knew it would come. And then it went from there to different rooms and different experiences. And I call them rooms because I was a child and that's how I saw them. But in totality, they were one. But I saw them almost synchronized so that I could ingest it. So do I think that there's all these different rooms? Not necessarily. It could all be one space. But what I do know is that that's the way they're going to show it to a child, because that's the way they show it to me.
Right.
So that I could separate what they were trying to say, kind of in an understanding way, kind of like you read a chapter of a book and then you close that one chapter and you're reading the next chapter. It doesn't all run together.
Yes.
So, so that you can actually conceptualize the chapter.
Yeah.
And then I ended up in the room of knowledge, which was, I used to tell people it was books with no books. They call that virtual now. But when I was young, I'm, you know, in the 60s, I didn't know what that was. And so there were books, but they weren't there. And they couldn't, and, you know, I kept saying, but they were books and they weren't there. And ultimately, I got to see our journey and learn to understand. So we do choose our journey, but not everything is controlled. So for instance, maybe my soul wanted to resonate the understanding and knowledge and feel what marriage felt like. So I'll be married. I might be 95, but I'll be married. If that's what I chose on my journey, who I marry, how long I'm married, the kind of marriage I have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is my free will, so that my soul can expand and grow. So if I don't understand that, I'm thinking they plan it all. I don't need to be here. You know, there's no reason to be here if free will isn't free will, right? Because if it's a planned event, they know about it. I know about it. Everyone else knows about it. Every psychic knows about it. So it's really already done.
Yes.
So there's nothing to learn.
Yes.
So, but you will be married.
Right.
And then, you know, and maybe more than once. And the same with everything we choose. So free will is very involved, and that's what they showed me. And I didn't know what that was either. I didn't understand, but because I wanted to understand, I got some knowledge of that. So that later on, when they downloaded more into me, I went, oh, that's what that meant. I went through an experience and I go, oh, I remember this. That's what that meant. That's kind of what happened to me throughout my journey. But for the sake of keeping it short and small, short as I can, that's what they were trying to say to me.
Wow.
And I saw a room, a virtual room, I guess, of companions. And those were our loved animals and beloved creatures. And they were happy and healthy and romping and playing and in the fields. I could see daisies. I actually sat in that field. I went to lives between lives, which is hard to explain, but I was just a child and they were telling me it's time to go, and they were putting me in the water. And I was walking on a river's edge with a beautiful angelic presence. So it was just surreal. My mother said she heard your baby's in the freezer. She ignored it. She didn't know what she was hearing.
Yeah.
And I remember almost saying it to her. So I remember seeing her. That's how I think I learned mediumship. I remember seeing her, and I remember being able to break that veil enough for her to hear my voice. And she said she heard it again, but it sounded more like me, like I'm in the freezer, mommy kind of feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
She couldn't identify it, but yet she did in her soul. And that's when she came. And it goes from there.
Wow. Wow. So it's amazing, isn't it, to say that you were that young. You didn't necessarily understand everything that was being shown to you at that particular point in time, and yet your ability to recount it, you know, because when you don't remember stuff with that degree of vivid ability to recall, but that, you know, that is, I mean, and that's a beautiful story.
Oh, it goes on and on and on. But I recall, in all honesty, so I've seen this again 2 other times. And I had a brain tumor, and I had an experience when I had my surgery. And also when my brother passed and when my father passed, so 3 other times actually. But vividly saw it 2 other times. And I saw the same thing, and I understood it that time. So I don't necessarily share that in my book simply for the sake of, I could be writing forever and people would start to doubt what I'm writing, because that's the way people work, right? You go, well, how is that possible? But I recall my brother pulling me back to the golden brick, you know, the yellow brick road. And what happened on that journey for him. He tried for 3 nights. I didn't know he died. He committed suicide, and they didn't find him for 3 days. And he died he did it on my birthday. And I thought that was atrocious. And he said to me later on, it was because I wanted you to remember me and know that how much I loved you, that I was thinking of you. Not, you know, not sad. I was thinking of you in a good way. And so that made sense to me, you know. So things as we go tend to make more sense as we review them again and again. And that's what happened to me, is when I needed to know what that meant, I would have this experience. And then there I was, knowing what that meant. And understanding that, oh, that was real. Because when that happens to you, as much as you know, right? But as a child, is that real? Kind of like if you have a visitation as a child, you know they were there, but then you go, was that real? You're a child in a child's mind. So I didn't get pulled out of my body with all this spiritual knowledge and understanding, and I think there's a reason for that. But I didn't get pulled out remembering everything from my past life or any of that. I was still that child, and I think it was because I was meant to come back. I was meant to learn as I go, and I was meant to grow. I'm having a human experience like everyone else, so I have to grow. And so that would be taken from me if I had all the knowledge in the world about what I was experiencing.
Right. Yeah. And you know, this is the thing that, again, I come back to the session that I had with you, that first 1-hour session. One of the things I realized that really drove me on to do the Elevated Planet thing with Jolie and building everything that we're building was because that was such a healing 1 hour. The reason I felt like I did when I left was because I felt healed, and I didn't even know I needed healing, but it just triggered something, and it just made me think, you know, something that's relatively hidden in the shadows, you might say, that like mediumship and things like that, which is not regarded as mainstream kind of things that, I mean, plenty of people who do believe in it, plenty of people do it, but it's still in the shadows a little. And I thought, well, anything this healing should not be in the shadows. We've got to do something to kind of elevate this to a point where it becomes normal, right? To be able to communicate. I mean, to me, I just love the fact that, you know, my mom, who died back in, I think, 1981, for that first time, I was connected with her again after all those years, 37 years or something like that. And it was remarkable because she was recounting things that happened like when I was 6. And she was with my Uncle Richard, who was also on the other side, but they were effectively pulling my leg about some incident that had happened with a car that I remembered and they both knew about. But it was like, it was all these things. And when my talking about so many things that just added up, but also explaining to me why certain things happened the way they had. And I thought, wow, this is just like this enormous, here we are, we're having a human experience, as you say. Just because you kind of like tap into the fact that we do start to understand what this is all about, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't get the roadblocks. It doesn't mean you don't get the life challenges, right? You'll continue to get them. But at the same time, at least you can approach them with a different kind of mindset. But that's the thing I got from it. I mean, like you coming back, because my experience was one, I don't know how many thousands of people that you actually affected in that positive way over the last decades. But if you can imagine how many people's lives you've touched and elevated because you did come back.
Thank you. That's so kind. Those are such kind words. I know that I'm the conduit, and I'm so grateful for that. But I also know that I had to be willing to be that. And I have to utilize my journey for that. And so I take that as an honor.